An audience member reached out to me. She's Nigerian, and she talked to me about how, for a while, because she came in the teenage years to America, she felt kind of in the middle. She couldn't fit in with the Nigerian community, and she couldn't fit in with the black community here. So, she felt kind of like an outsider with all communities. And that kind of got me thinking, because one of the reasons I started this channel was because I always felt like an outsider everywhere. And, I have a lot of Chinese culture in me, but I'm not fully Chinese. And I have a lot of American culture in me, but I'm not fully American. So I kind of wanted to bring in someone else to talk about this, because the 1.5 generation experience is really interesting. Now, you have not only had the Chinese culture in you, but she's actually lived in the Scandinavian countries for how many years? Like 8 years?
Oh, no, I was born and raised there.
Oh, never mind. So
Danish citizen.
You have a very interesting story, because it's like I see in you what I see in me, but it's a different type of culture clash, because it's like a Scandinavian / Chinese, and then now you're in America, so there's like an American thing. I drew this graph, I'm sorry, I got a little smudged. On the x-axis is how objectively assimilated you are to a culture. On the y-axis, it's how much you feel towards that culture, your cultural identity. And what I realized is, when you first start assimilating, you get to a point you feel like you know a lot. But then as you start learning about the culture more and more, you actually have like an uncanny valley dip. You know so much, but you're not completely assimilated. So you're kind of like, oh no, I feel like an imposter. I don't belong. There's still so much I have to learn. So the reason I drew this here, and the reason why I talk about this, is I feel like this towards China and America. Like when I'm in China, I feel like this. When I'm in America, I kind of feel like this too. Like I'm very Americanized, but there's certain things I just can't get about American people. Like I don't embrace football culture. I don't embrace drinking culture. These fundamental Americanisms I can't get. It's like part of me feels like an imposter. When I go to China, I have problems with China. Like Chinese people, the way they interpret events, it's very indirect. Chinese people are not direct with a lot of things. Like they're always doubting ulterior motives, because that's how the Chinese society is. Like I'm very direct. So like I don't feel objectively assimilated to the Chinese culture. And so as a 1.5 generation immigrant towards American culture and Chinese culture, I'm in this kind of valley of like how much subjective cultural identity I have. And so maybe for you, like towards the Scandinavian culture and towards the Chinese culture, you're kind of here too.
Yeah, I am.
For those of you watching who are 1.5 generation immigrants, whether you're Asian immigrants, African immigrants, maybe even European immigrants, Latin American immigrants, I might want to start like a subreddit for 1.5 generation immigrants. I think that's a good community for me to start. And she'll be my first member in the community, of course. Maybe I'll do a meetup group in LA. All us 1.5 really culturally clashed, like identity weirded people. We should all share our stories.
Sure.
You had the Chinese culture, and you were growing up in the Scandinavian countries. Like, what were some interesting cultural clashes you had?
So in Scandinavia, people, they drink a lot. They start in a really early age, around 13 and stuff. And because of my Chinese background, every weekend people went out, hanging out, start drinking, but I wasn't allowed from my parents. So, yeah, maybe I sound a bit douchey, but I was one of the popular girls, but when we started being teenagers, I actually started to get excluded because I couldn't join them.
You couldn't join them and do the party, the bars, the stuff like that.
Yeah.
Okay. So that was a big cultural clash. Now, did you talk to your parents? Were like, can you let me please go out with my friends? Did you do that ever?
Actually, no, because the Chinese community in Denmark is pretty small. So actually, pretty much everyone, we hang out with each other. So we could all relate. So I would just hang out with them.
Okay, makes sense.
In Denmark, actually, a lot of people thought I was adopted because I always hung out with white people when I was in school and all that. But in my free time, I hung out with Chinese people.
A lot of Chinese people. Okay. So you managed to kind of get past the culture clash a little bit.
Yeah, but maybe because I've always liked to not being identified as one thing. So I actually like to be around different cultural groups and just hang out with them.
Interesting.
Yeah.
A talk we've talked about in the past on this channel is sometimes if you can go between tribes, you just embrace it. Just go between the tribes. Maybe you'll never fit in completely, but it also makes you able to open doors more. You're kind of like the door opener.
Yeah.
You're not necessarily the the person that stays in the. I'm trying to use an analogy and it's like not working. But like you're like the door warmer or the house warmer, but you're not the person that owns the house, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, how many years do you think it's going to take you to adapt to American culture?
Oh, I'm pretty adaptable, so not long. I think I've already adapted pretty much. Also, American culture, like growing up in Denmark, all the things you see on TV is American things.
That's true.
So I guess the American culture has always been in me somehow.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Especially if you're from China. For a while, it was harder to access Western media, especially in the 90s when I was in China.
Mm-hmm.
So it creates kind of like a different, very different identity independent of the West, whereas probably Europeans, maybe a lot of Latin Americans even, they have so much Western media already playing through.
Yeah.
A lot of people in LA is probably a city that's filled with people in this kind of valley, because LA is such a city of transplants. So LA's unique in that everyone's kind of like this, so everyone's kind of lost. But it's an opportunity too. It's an opportunity for you to kind of create your own community, create your own groups.
The thing is, I don't feel like people are lost there. You don't have to be 100% American or 100% Taiwanese or 100% Chinese to feel welcome and to have a good time. So
what I would say, using this model I drew, if people are like here, I think it's much easier, right? If you're in this area of the graph, it's much easier for you to not feel lost because your cultural identity is in the positive. But if you're here, your cultural identity is in the negative. So like I think what you're saying is here.
Yeah.
Like if people follow along here, then it's much easier. But I think a lot of 1.5 generation people, and like you said, a lot of people in LA are probably down here.
But I was thinking, because there are so many different cultures here in LA, so actually there isn't a culture. There's not a culture to have what LA is.
That's true. Even though objectively, maybe a lot of people feel here, because there's so many enclaves, there's so many little ethnic cultures here, people can be able to feel more like this. Yeah. If I go and move to Alhambra, maybe instead of feeling here, I'd actually feel here. So guys, I need to move to Alhambra. For all my audience in Alhambra, find housing for me. I'll move in. I'm serious. Because I think living in Koreatown, because I'm not Korean, like I'm not even here. I'm probably like all the way here. I got negative objective assimilation to Korean culture, and I have negative cultural identity. So you're Taiwanese American.
no, I'm Taiwanese.
Just Taiwan. How long have you been here?
3 years in LA.
Interesting.
Yeah, what, 2.5 years.
So you 2.5 years in LA in America, you still only say Taiwanese. You don't say you're Taiwanese American.
No, because I
Oh.
I only have Taiwanese passport, so
I have a question. When
Yeah.
people ask where you're from,
I say America.
You say America.
And then they say, where are you really from? And I'm like, oh, it's Sichuan. Born in Sichuan.
Sichuan?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you ever think you'll identify yourself as Taiwanese American?
Maybe when I get the citizenship.
Oh, I see. So hers is completely based on
Yes.
kind of certain objective identification things.
Yeah.
You'll base it completely on the objective documents instead of like a subjective feeling. Like some people, maybe they've never lived in China or they've never lived in Korea, but they're like, oh, I'm Chinese by heart or I'm Korean by heart. Like you're not one of those.
Because I grew up, I've been in Taiwan for the first 23 years of my life, so I am still identify as Taiwanese.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So, like, her Taiwanese identity is like all the way here because she's very assimilated into Taiwanese culture, whereas her American identity is more like maybe here or like here. So she's not at the valley yet. But I think what this means is in 5 years when she gets her citizenship, she's going to be here and she's going to come back and she's going to explain and relate to Caroline and me. So.
I can still have the cycle, but always be above the line.
Oh, I see. So you think your moments here are gonna be like 2 seconds or 2 minutes or 2 months, and you're gonna end up here very quickly. You're gonna end up in the positive.
I mean, sometimes I kind of enjoy the clash, you know?
Yeah,
like,
that's true,
I
you do.
enjoy the confused feeling I feel sometimes, because like you're learning different culture, and it's kind of interesting. It's kind of fun.
So I started this channel too. I'm here, I'm always confused. Let's just enjoy this. Let's talk smack. So I agree. I think that means you need to come on this channel more. If you enjoy being here and enjoy that. So
I don't feel like I'm there.
Okay, fine. So for you, maybe if I had a pen, which I don't, your value's actually very low. I'm trying to mirror this, but your value's like actually here instead of like mine down here.
Doesn't have a value.
Or she does, or maybe hers is a 0.
Yeah.
It doesn't go all the way in the negative. It's either positive or it's 0. Or maybe the curve just curves down a little bit like this, but it never ends up even at 0 or in the negatives. So maybe we have to modify this paradigm a little for hardcore assimilated people like her. Anyways, I think this was a great talk. You guys want to give your social medias at all on camera for everyone to follow? You don't have to.
It's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thank you.
Fee-fi-fo-fum. I'm the evil spirit that guards the rootin' tootin' diamond. Give it to me lest evil befall you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
The spirit commands you to stand on your head in that lily pond until further notice.